Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you will strip away every comfortable lie you've been telling yourself about how the world works. You've been walking through life believing that kindness is rewarded, that fairness exists, that people will treat you well simply because you treat them well. You've been operating under the naive assumption that the universe owes you something for your good intentions. But here's the truth that Thomas Hobbes understood centuries ago and that you need to grasp right now. Life is not a fairy tale, and human nature is not what your Sunday school teacher told you it was. The world is a battlefield, and you've been showing up unarmed. The moment you stop caring about what others think, the moment you withdraw your desperate need for their approval, something extraordinary happens. They panic. They scramble. They suddenly realize that their power over you was nothing more than an illusion, built on your own willingness to be controlled. You see, the dirty secret of human interaction is that most people derive their sense of importance from having others seek their validation. When you stop seeking it, when you stop feeding their ego with your attention and desperation, they lose their grip on reality. They cannot comprehend a world where they are not the center of your universe, where their opinions don't send you into spirals of self-doubt and frantic course corrections. This is not cruelty speaking. This is raw, unfiltered truth. Hobbes knew that in the state of nature, life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. But he also understood that this condition exists because we allow it to exist. We submit to the Leviathan, not because we must, but because we choose to. And in our daily lives, we create mini Leviathans out of everyone around us, granting them authority over our emotions, our decisions, our very sense of self-worth. We make them gods, and then we wonder why they treat us like subjects rather than equals. The people who panic when you stop caring are revealing something crucial about themselves and about the dynamic you've allowed to develop. They are showing you that their interest in you was never about genuine connection, respect, or love. It was about control. It was about having a reliable source of validation, a predictable response to their manipulation, a guaranteed audience for their drama. When you remove yourself from this equation, when you stop being their emotional supply, they experience what can only be described as withdrawal. Like addicts suddenly cut off from their drug of choice, they become desperate, angry, confused, and ultimately pathetic. But here's where it gets interesting, and where Machiavelli's wisdom becomes invaluable. The prince taught us that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But there's a deeper truth hidden in this observation. Respect comes not from being needed, but from being independent. When you stop caring, you stop being needy. When you stop being needy, people can no longer predict your behavior. When they cannot predict your behavior, they cannot control you. And when they cannot control you, they must finally treat you as an equal, or risk losing access to you entirely. This is why your indifference becomes their panic. This is why your self-sufficiency becomes their nightmare. They had grown comfortable with your predictability, your eagerness to please, your willingness to compromise yourself for the sake of maintaining peace. They had built their sense of superiority on your perceived inferiority. But when you withdraw that foundation, their entire worldview collapses. Suddenly, they must confront the possibility that you might actually be better than they thought, that you might have options they didn't know about, that you might not need them as much as they need you. The beautiful irony is that the very behavior that drove you to stop caring is the same behavior that reveals their true character. People show you who they really are when they believe they have power over you. They reveal their petty cruelties, their casual disrespect, their assumption that you will always be there to absorb their negativity and reflect back their greatness. They take your kindness for weakness, your patience for stupidity, your loyalty for desperation. And they continue this behavior until the moment you stop participating in their game. Nietzsche understood this dynamic when he wrote about the will to power. Every human interaction is, at its core, a power struggle. Those who deny this are either lying or deluding themselves. The question is not whether power dynamics exist, but whether you will be conscious of them and learn to navigate them with skill and dignity. When you stop caring about the approval of those who have shown you they don't deserve it, you are not becoming cold or heartless. You are becoming strategic. You are recognizing that your energy, your attention, your emotional investment are finite resources that should be allocated with the same care you would give to any other valuable asset. The panic you witness when you withdraw is not really about you at all. It's about them confronting their own emptiness. People who derive their sense of worth from controlling others are fundamentally insecure. They need constant validation that they matter, that they have influence, that they can affect the behavior of those around them. When you stop providing this validation, they are forced to face themselves without the mirror of your reactions, and what they see terrifies them, because they realize how little substance exists beneath their carefully constructed facades. This is where the philosophy becomes practical wisdom. Understanding human nature is not an academic exercise, it's a survival skill. The world is full of people who will exploit your goodness, who will mistake your kindness for weakness, who will take advantage of your willingness to give them the benefit of the doubt. These people exist in your workplace, in your family, in your social circles, and sometimes even in your most intimate relationships. They are not evil in the cartoonish sense. They are simply operating according to their nature, which is to maximize their own advantage at the expense of others whenever possible. When you stop caring about their opinion of you, you stop being vulnerable to their manipulation. When you stop seeking their approval, you stop giving them leverage. When you stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided to misunderstand you, you stop wasting your energy on futile efforts. This is not about becoming callous or indifferent to genuine human connection. This is about developing the wisdom to distinguish between people who add value to your life and people who subtract from it. The panic response you observe is actually a form of respect, even if it doesn't feel like it. It's the respect that comes from recognizing that you are not as controllable as they assumed. It's the acknowledgement that you have more power than they gave you credit for. It's the grudging admission that their previous treatment of you was based on a miscalculation of your worth and your options. They panic because they realize they may have underestimated you, and now they must recalibrate their entire approach to the relationship. But here's the crucial point. You cannot unsee what you have seen. Once you understand how power dynamics work, once you recognize the patterns of manipulation and control, you cannot go back to being naive. You cannot return to the comfortable ignorance of believing that everyone has your best interests at heart. This knowledge comes with a burden, but it also comes with tremendous freedom. You are no longer subject to the whims of people who view you as a supporting character in their personal drama. You become the protagonist of your own story. The transition from caring too much to caring strategically is not easy. It requires you to confront uncomfortable truths about the people you've invested in, the relationships you've prioritized, and the patterns you've allowed to develop. It requires you to acknowledge that some of the people you've been trying to please are not worthy of your effort. It requires you to admit that you may have been complicit in your own mistreatment by accepting behavior that you should have rejected from the beginning. This is where Hobbes's insight about the social contract becomes personally relevant. You have been living under an unspoken agreement that your role is to provide others with validation, support, and unconditional acceptance in exchange for their presence in your life. But like any contract, this agreement is only valid if both parties are fulfilling their obligations. When they consistently fail to reciprocate your respect, your kindness, your consideration, the contract becomes void. You are under no moral obligation to continue honoring an agreement that the other party has repeatedly violated. The panic you witness when you stop caring is their recognition that the contract has been terminated. They are forced to confront the reality that their behavior has consequences, that their treatment of you was not sustainable, that their assumption of your infinite patience was incorrect. This realization is uncomfortable for them because it requires them to take responsibility for their actions, something that people who rely on manipulation and control are typically reluctant to do. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their panic is not your problem to solve. Their inability to understand why you've changed is not your burden to bear. You are not obligated to educate them about respect, to explain why their behavior was unacceptable, or to give them opportunities to promise they'll do better. You are not required to be their therapist, their mother, or their personal development coach. Your only obligation is to yourself and to the life you want to create. This shift in perspective represents a fundamental evolution in your understanding of human nature and your place in the world. You begin to see that respect is not freely given. It must be earned and maintained. You understand that your value is not determined by others' recognition of it, but by your own recognition of it. You realize that the people who truly deserve your energy are those who appreciate it, reciprocate it, and treat it as the gift it is, not as an entitlement. The most profound realization is that indifference is often the most powerful response to mistreatment. Not anger, not revenge, not elaborate schemes to get back at those who have wronged you. Simply withdrawing your emotional investment, your attention, your energy. This withdrawal is more devastating to those who depend on your reactions than any form of retaliation could be. It robs them of the drama they crave, the emotional response that feeds their sense of importance, the validation that you still care enough to be hurt by their actions. When you stop caring, you become unpredictable. Unpredictability is power. People can only manipulate you if they can anticipate your responses, if they can push your buttons with confidence that you will react in predictable ways. When you remove yourself from their emotional ecosystem, when you stop participating in their psychological games, you force them to confront the possibility that they may not be as significant in your life as they assumed. This is why they panic. This is why they suddenly become concerned about your well-being, why they reach out with hollow apologies, why they attempt to hoover you back into their orbit with promises of change and newfound appreciation. They are not responding to genuine remorse or sudden enlightenment. They are responding to the threat of losing their power over you, their access to your emotional energy, their reliable source of validation and drama. The key to maintaining this powerful position is consistency. You cannot waver. You cannot allow temporary moments of weakness to undermine your newfound clarity. You cannot let their panic manipulate you into caring again. This requires tremendous mental discipline and emotional maturity. It requires you to remember why you stopped caring in the first place, to hold on to the lessons you've learned about their character and your worth. Understanding this dynamic changes everything. It changes how you approach relationships, how you assess people's intentions, how you allocate your time and energy. It teaches you to observe behavior rather than listen to words, to judge people by their consistency rather than their promises, to value actions over explanations. It develops your ability to detect manipulation early, to recognize patterns of disrespect before they become entrenched, to protect your emotional well-being proactively rather than reactively. This wisdom extends beyond personal relationships into every area of your life. In your career, you learn to stop seeking validation from superiors who will never acknowledge your contributions, and instead focus on developing skills and building relationships that advance your interests. In your social circles, you learn to invest in people who reciprocate your energy rather than those who drain it. In your family dynamics, you learn to set boundaries that protect your peace rather than enabling dysfunction. The panic of others becomes a gauge of your own growth. The more uncomfortable your independence makes them, the more you know you're moving in the right direction. Their discomfort is proof that you are no longer playing by the old rules, that you are no longer accepting the role they assigned to you, that you are no longer available to be their emotional dumping ground or validation source. This transformation is not about becoming heartless or disconnected from human emotion. It's about becoming strategic with your heart, protective of your emotions, and selective with your investments. It's about recognizing that not everyone deserves access to your inner world, that intimacy is a privilege to be earned, not a right to be assumed. It's about understanding that your care is valuable precisely because it is limited, and that scarcity creates value in human relationships just as it does in economics. The people who deserve your care will never make you question whether you should give it. They will not require you to convince them of your worth or prove your loyalty through endless sacrifice. They will not panic when you have bad days, when you're not available to meet their emotional needs, when you prioritize yourself occasionally. They will not mistake your kindness for weakness or your patience for stupidity. They will recognize your care as the gift it is and reciprocate accordingly. When you finally understand this, when you finally stop caring about the approval of those who have shown you they don't deserve it, you discover something remarkable: your own power. Not power over others, but power over yourself. The power to choose who gets your energy, who earns your respect, who deserves your time. The power to walk away from situations that diminish you, to reject treatment that degrades you, to demand better because you know you deserve better. This is the ultimate lesson that Hobbes, Machiavelli, and Nietzsche were all pointing toward in their different ways. The recognition that you are responsible for your own position in the world. You are not a victim of circumstances beyond your control. You are not helpless in the face of others' behavior. You are not required to accept whatever treatment others decide to give you. You have the power to choose, and that choice begins with the decision to stop caring about the wrong things and the wrong people. The panic you witness when you make this choice is simply the sound of power shifting. It's the noise that comes when established hierarchies are challenged, when old agreements are terminated, when someone refuses to play their assigned role in someone else's drama. It's the sound of people realizing that they may have taken you for granted, that they may have pushed too far, that they may have underestimated your capacity for independence. Let them panic. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their inability to understand your transformation is not your burden to bear. Your job is not to make them comfortable with your growth, but to continue growing despite their discomfort. Your obligation is not to their feelings, but to your own future. Your priority is not their panic, but your own peace. This is how you reclaim your power. By recognizing that caring about the wrong things is the fastest way to lose control of your life, and that selective indifference is one of the most powerful tools you can develop. When you stop caring about their approval, you start caring about your own standards. When you stop caring about their opinion, you start caring about your own values. When you stop caring about their comfort, you start caring about your own growth. And in that shift, in that fundamental reorientation of your priorities, you discover something that will change your life forever. The person whose opinion matters most is the one looking back at you in the mirror. Everything else is just noise, and noise is only powerful if you choose to listen to it. But let's dig deeper into what this transformation actually looks like in practice, because understanding the theory is meaningless without grasping the brutal reality of its implementation. When you first begin to withdraw your care from those who have taken it for granted, you will face resistance that goes beyond mere panic. You will encounter manipulation tactics so sophisticated, so emotionally calculated, that they will test every ounce of resolve you've built. They will guilt you, charm you, threaten you, and promise you everything you've ever wanted to hear. This is not accidental. This is strategic warfare for your soul. The people who have grown comfortable exploiting your goodness have invested considerable time and energy into understanding your psychological vulnerabilities. They know exactly which buttons to push to make you doubt your newfound clarity. They will remind you of all the times they were there for you, conveniently omitting the countless times they were not. They will paint themselves as victims of your sudden coldness, rewriting history to make your reasonable boundaries seem like cruel punishments. They will enlist mutual friends and family members to question your behavior, to suggest that you've changed for the worse, to imply that your growth is actually a regression into selfishness. This is where your understanding of human nature becomes your armor. These tactics are not evidence that you've made a mistake. They are proof that you've made the right decision. The intensity of their reaction is directly proportional to how much they were benefiting from your previous behavior. The more desperately they fight to pull you back into old patterns, the more clearly you can see how much they were taking from you without giving back. Their panic is not about losing you as a person. It's about losing their access to your resources, your emotional labor, your willingness to absorb their problems while neglecting your own. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote about the nature of princes and subjects. Those who have grown accustomed to power never relinquish it willingly. They will use every tool at their disposal to maintain their position, including tools that would have worked on the person you used to be. But you are no longer that person. You have evolved beyond their capacity to manipulate, and this evolution terrifies them because it exposes the weakness of their position. They were never as powerful as they appeared. They were simply skilled at exploiting your willingness to be powerless. The loneliness that comes with this awakening is real and profound. When you stop participating in the familiar dance of dysfunction, when you refuse to enable the very behaviors that were slowly destroying you, some relationships will not survive. This is not a failure on your part. This is the natural consequence of growth. You cannot remain in the same place and expect to become a different person. You cannot maintain the same relationships and expect different outcomes. Some connections were built on your willingness to diminish yourself, and when you refuse to play that role, the connection itself becomes obsolete. This realization brings with it a grief that few people talk about. You will mourn the relationships you thought you had, only to discover they were based on conditions you can no longer accept. You will grieve the version of yourself that believed everyone deserved endless chances, unlimited patience, unconditional forgiveness. You will feel the weight of seeing clearly, perhaps for the first time, how many people in your life were there not because they valued you, but because you made their lives easier, more comfortable, more dramatic, more validated. But within this grief lies the seed of your liberation. Every relationship that cannot survive your growth was a relationship that was holding you back. Every person who becomes hostile when you start prioritizing yourself was someone who was benefiting from your self-neglect. Every connection that requires you to dim your light, minimize your worth, or apologize for your boundaries is a connection that was never serving your highest good. The pain of losing these relationships is temporary. The freedom that comes from releasing them is permanent. This is where Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence becomes personally relevant. If you had to live your life exactly as it is, over and over again, for eternity, would you choose to spend that eternity seeking the approval of people who have consistently shown you that your worth to them is conditional on your willingness to serve their needs? Would you choose to spend infinite lifetimes walking on eggshells around people who punish you for having needs, opinions, or boundaries? The answer, when framed this way, becomes obvious. The power that comes from stopping your care is not the power to hurt others, though they may interpret it that way. It is the power to protect yourself. It is the power to allocate your energy consciously rather than unconsciously. It is the power to choose your battles instead of having them chosen for you. It is the power to say no without explanation, to walk away without justification, to prioritize your peace without permission. This power feels foreign at first because you have been conditioned to believe that your value comes from your usefulness to others, your availability to solve their problems, your willingness to put their comfort before your own well-being. The world will test your resolve in ways you cannot anticipate. People will emerge from your past with sudden urgent needs that only you can meet. Family members will create crises that somehow require your immediate attention and sacrifice. Friends will present you with opportunities that seem beneficial but come with strings attached that compromise your newly established boundaries. Romantic interests will appear with promises of the love and appreciation you've always craved, but their actions will reveal the same patterns of exploitation you've just escaped. Your ability to maintain your position depends entirely on your commitment to consistency. You cannot make exceptions for people who haven't earned them. You cannot compromise your standards because someone has a good excuse. You cannot return to old patterns because the alternative feels uncomfortable or lonely. The moment you begin to make exceptions, you signal to the world that your boundaries are negotiable, that your standards are flexible, that your resolve can be worn down with enough persistence. This consistency requires you to develop a relationship with discomfort that most people never achieve. You must become comfortable with being misunderstood, with being labeled as cold or selfish, with disappointing people who have grown accustomed to your unlimited availability. You must learn to sit with the guilt that comes from prioritizing your own needs, even when that guilt feels overwhelming. You must develop the strength to maintain your position even when everyone around you is telling you that you're wrong, that you've changed for the worse, that you're being unreasonable. The truth is that you have changed, and that change threatens people who were benefiting from the old version of you. The version of you that accepted disrespect as normal, that made excuses for other people's bad behavior, that believed you had to earn love through endless giving. The version of you that thought your worth was determined by how much you could endure, how much you could forgive, how much you could sacrifice for others. That version of you is easier to exploit, and its disappearance represents a loss of power for those who had grown dependent on your willingness to be powerless. Your new understanding of human nature will color every interaction going forward. You will notice patterns you were blind to before. You will see manipulation attempts that would have succeeded in the past. You will recognize love bombing, guilt tripping, gaslighting, and emotional blackmail as they happen rather than months or years later. This clarity is both a gift and a burden. It protects you from exploitation, but it also reveals how pervasive that exploitation was in your previous life. The people who deserve to remain in your transformed life will adapt to your new boundaries without making you feel guilty for having them. They will respect your time without you having to defend it. They will appreciate your energy without expecting unlimited access to it. They will support your growth without trying to pull you back into old patterns. These people may be fewer in number than your previous social circle, but their quality will more than compensate for the reduced quantity. This evolution changes not just who you allow into your life, but how you show up in the world. You begin to carry yourself differently. You speak with more authority because you know your worth is not up for debate. You make decisions more quickly because you're no longer paralyzed by the fear of disappointing others. You pursue opportunities more aggressively because you're no longer waiting for permission from people who have no investment in your success. You become magnetic in a way that authentic confidence always is, attracting people who appreciate strength rather than those who prey on weakness. The ultimate realization is that the care you withdrew from undeserving people doesn't disappear. It gets redirected toward yourself, and toward those who have proven they deserve it. Your capacity for love, kindness, and generosity doesn't diminish when you become selective about who receives it. It becomes more powerful because it becomes more intentional. The people who experience your care now know that it's genuine, that it's chosen rather than compulsive, that it comes from abundance rather than desperation. This is the final lesson that separates those who understand power from those who are forever subject to it. The recognition that your energy is your most valuable asset, and like any valuable asset, it must be protected, invested wisely, and never given away cheaply. When you finally understand this, when you finally stop caring about the approval of those who have shown you they don't deserve it, you don't become heartless, you become heart-smart. And in a world full of people who will exploit your heart if you let them, being heart-smart is the difference between being a victim and being victorious.